Hello and welcome to today's Expert Series webinar by Actual Tech Media. Today's topic is SASE 101. What is SASE and why do you need it? Thank you so much for joining us on this event produced by Actual Tech Media. And before we get started, I want to just do a few housekeeping items here. First off, of course, we want this event to be educational, as we do with all of our webinars here at Actual Tech Media. And we encourage your questions there in the questions tab of our audience console. I see many of you have already said good morning, good afternoon from across the United States and around the world, but we also want your technical questions for a live Q&A session we'll be doing with our expert presenter at the end of the event. So we encourage your questions on the webinar, and we even have a grand prize we'll be announcing at the end of the webinar for an Amazon $300 gift card. So make sure that you stay tuned for that, of course, but also a ton of really awesome content. I mean, SASE is just a hot topic, hot technology in the world today, and you're going to learn a whole lot about it on today's webinar. I also want to call your attention there to the handouts tab. It's there that you will find a resource from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Palo Alto Networks, and of course, we appreciate them helping to make this webinar possible, helping to make this education possible. If you'd like to learn more about Palo Alto Networks and their SASE solution, you can get comprehensive security with SASE from Palo Alto Networks, and they are offering the 10 tenets of an effective SASE solution ebook. You can use the QR code right there on the screen in the slides window. Just scan that with your mobile device, and that will bring up a resource that you can check out for yourself. It's the SASE ebook 10 tenets of an effective SASE solution. That resource is also, and the QR code is also there in the handouts tab. And of course, always visit Palo Alto Networks for more information. All right, so with that, I'm excited now to bring in today's expert presenter. Welcome to Evgeniy Kharam, Vice President for Solutions Architecture at the Herjavec Group and co-founder of the Security Architecture podcast. Make sure that you check out the securityarchitecture.org website, where you can learn about Evgeniy's podcast and newsletter and all sorts of excellent resources. He's got the Cyber Dictionary over there as well. It's an excellent podcast to keep up to date on the world of security, the ever-changing world of security. So it's a pleasure to have Evgeniy on the event today. With that, I'll hand it off. Take it away, Evgeniy.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depend where are you. I am very, very happy to be here today and talk today about SASE 101 and later on SSE. I feel this is a fundamental topic for our cybersecurity industry, for corporate architecture, for corporate security as well. Many of us work from home, many of us work from anywhere. We all use SaaS applications, we all browse the internet, we all remotely connect to certain applications or resources. So this topic is very, very important. There's a lot of shift in the industry and what's happening. So let's start and begin. Let me move myself to the side for a second. So I'm Evgeniy. Both me and Dimitri started a podcast around 2 years ago, and actually our first topic was SASE. We did 2 seasons about SASE, Secure Access Service Edge for outbound browsing and remote access as well. I pick up a lot of knowledge about SASE from the podcast, but I work with security web gateway, with CASB, with remote access solutions for the last 10 years. Of course, CASB was not around for such a long time, but I have a lot of experience in the industry. My full-time job, I run architecture in a company called Herjavec Group. You may have heard about it. Dimitri couldn't join us today, but he is a CTO in IoT and SBOM company here in Toronto. I did quite a lot of work with enterprises in Canada, in US, in Europe to help them architect their cybersecurity architecture and their solutions. So I have a lot of information about network security, endpoint security, cloud security as well. And I'm very, very happy to share my knowledge and what I learned for all this time I've been in the industry. What we're going to cover today? We're going to cover, of course, what is the SASE framework. We will do a high overview on the framework. We will go back in history to explain how it all started, because I think it's important where we are right now. Many people ask me, what happened if a new company will start today? How long will it take them to be on a position that we're going to compete with the major players right now? And you will see in the history why it's not so easy, why it will take a number of years to get to the point, in my mind at least 2-3 years, to be able to architect, to be able to R&D all the features. We'll do a deeper dive on each pillar of the SASE framework. We'll talk a bit about the vendors as well. We'll also explain the difference between SASE and SSE and why it happened and what does it mean for you as an end user. Let's begin. So SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. It's a term defined by Gartner in 2019. Forrester defined it a bit differently. People spoke about it before, but Gartner was the first that actually defined it a bit more. I personally started to present on a topic I called it Beyond Perimeter in 2017, because I envisioned that we already have cloud security web gateways, we already have ZTNA and remote access solution, and with the shift from people traveling and need the policy to have everywhere, it's very, very important to have such model. As you see here on the slide, there's two major buckets. On the left top side, we see the network bucket, and on the bottom right, we see the security bucket. The security bucket consists from three major pillars: security web gateway and firewall as a service, CASB, and ZTNA. In a way, we can separate them, and it's actually where SSE comes along later on. We'll explain more. Some people not putting together firewall as a service and security web gateway, but in my mind, it's a correct definition, because the moment you're working in internet, you're pretty much working with port 80 and 443 in majority of the time. Of course, you want to inspect more than this for malware and CNC control, but the majority of the application, as you probably know, internet runs on HTTP and HTTPS. Majority of the time on HTTPS. I want to go back and kind of explain how companies came to the SASE framework, because each of them started somewhere. As I mentioned before, none of the companies just started and built the entire SASE portfolio in one day. It took time. And we here see 5 different, let's call it a pond. SD-WAN definitely is the ones that bring the network. We have a couple of very important players here. ZTNA, many different vendors that started in a ZTNA, in remote access pond, and later on added additional functionality, or they partner with somebody else. We definitely have secure web gateway. This is a very old category. People and companies been playing in this category for a very long time. From blue code to days, semantic days, so many companies were there in the beginning to help us secure the communication to the internet using proxy files and different ways. CASB, not so new anymore, but still been around for some time, and we will of course dive in here. You'll see here too BitGlass and Netscope. I left BitGlass here, even so BitGlass right now is part of Forcepoint, and they joined the solution. It's called Forcepoint now, right now, but they originated from the CASB world. Netscope was a true CASB player as well, that later on added other vendors as well. And of course, we have the firewall space with all the big players here, like Checkpoint, Palo, Fortinet, and Barracuda, that all of them have right now solution, and they're doing pretty much all the pillars, including SD-WAN in some cases, like Palo Alto and Fortinet, for example. So this is important to kind of understand from where you're coming and what is the strengths of each vendor. This is also may lead you to understanding more about why certain companies have certain features. Let me move myself to the right, because I think it's going to be a bit easier. Okay, great. So let's dive into the idea of as a service, because it's fundamental to SASE and SAC. And if you look Gartner, they're talking about the scalability of the service. They're not talking about, oh, I have an appliance, I now move the appliance, lift and shift in the cloud, and now I have a SASE service. And I agree with the idea of scalability as a service. And I want to kind of dial in a bit more here on this part. The idea of moving something from my hardware firewall, hardware device on-prem to the cloud, it means I'm taking a lot of the worries I have right now and I'm pushing them to somebody else. And I can focus on the policy part, and I don't need to focus on the high availability, on version, who's responsible and what. Let me provide you some examples. Right now, if you have a hardware device on-prem, you will need to upgrade the devices, N-1 or maybe up to date. If you have many offices, it means you may need to spend quite a lot of time and money, and in some cases outsource this work to somebody else. Also, if the company release a major version every 9 months or every year and a half, it means the moment you finish upgrade, you may need to start plan your next upgrade. This costs you time, this costs you money. With as a service part, this is now the vendor responsibility to upgrade the devices. And not just that, the moment they release a new feature, you don't need to wait until you upgrade your devices on-prem. You may get the feature in a matter of weeks or maybe even days, depending on the vendor. So you get a lot of, we can say, win-win situations here. Responsibility. If your device go down on-prem, who is responsible? You need to architect your environment in a high availability state. You need to architect your environment with all the cables, with everything around these devices. And if it goes down, you need to replace it. You need to RMA it. You need to monitor the device as well. You need to purchase additional monitoring equipment to make sure you know what's happening with your devices. If the hard drive is going down or something else going down, or it may run out of CPU. And you're probably familiar with the idea that RMA could be interesting, because if you have next business day, it may take a while to get it. Or maybe if the device in a very remote location, it may be longer time to get the device. And if you didn't build high availabilities, and maybe you don't have this portion. With the cloud, it's the problem of the SASE vendor umbrella providers and not your anymore. They need to scale, they need to do all this stuff. They can provide you the way to monitor the devices, basically like a dashboard or email notification. And this way you will know what's happening with them, but it's no longer your problem. Availability is also, of course, important. We just discussed about it. And we want the provider to have many different locations, we call them POPs, to host your infrastructure, to host your data, not your data, it's their infrastructure. And if you're in Germany, you have a closest pop in Germany. If you're in Toronto, in Toronto. If you're in LA, or in Israel, you'll get the best of the latency if the provider is right. And of course, you can now outsource this part to someone else, and you can focus on your business, what's making money for your business, and spend less money on this part. I believe it is very, very important, and this is where the entire industry is going. So let's go backwards and then go forwards. Let's start from the security features. What actually included as part of SASE? Whatever you see here on the screen, it's actually going into the SASE. We're probably familiar with IPS, DNS filtering, next generation firewalling, sandboxing, remote access, browser isolation. In some cases, it was different technologies that were separated. Right now, they merge to one, and right now they merge even to one framework. So SASE doesn't actually define new security controls. It takes into account what was there before and put them under one framework. Same story happening with network features on the SD-WAN part. We are of course familiar with traffic shaping, on the high availability, QoS, geo-restriction in some cases, VPNs. All these functionalities on the network side are going to be part of SD-WAN, and we definitely see quite a lot of movement on the SD-WAN part, on the offices migration, on the moving from MPLS to SD-WAN, and many other things. We'll dial in later on more about the connectivity part and what do we see right now with the major SASE vendors and movement. So let's go on each pillar, and as I promised, we'll dive in to each pillar. SD-WAN. Think about this part. We have a way to get the traffic from where you are to the security part, to the POP for this. I can do it using SD-WAN, IPsec, SSL, SDP, but I also need a physical layer here on the bottom. How do I actually get there? If it's a cable, if it's a wireless. In majority of the cases, we call it SD-WAN right now, but even a router you can still create an IPsec tunnel or GRE tunnel from this. So it's like a logical layer and a physical layer. Is it have to be under one provider? Not really. Your provider may have a security feature and may use somebody else for the network features. There's also providers that do both. They have the physical part and they added security features on top. As I mentioned in the beginning, it's quite hard to have all the bells and whistles under one vendor from the beginning, and they just take time to develop. So you need to think, do you want it to have under one or separated? And again, this is why SSE is important, and we'll explain a bit later what does it mean. How do I actually use this information? If I'm in an office, in majority of the cases, what I will do, I will create tunnels from my office location to my SASE provider. If it's a router, it's probably going to be IPsec or GRE, or it's a firewall, it's probably going to be IPsec, or maybe if it's Cisco, it will do GRE as well. If it's an SD-WAN device, we'll use the SD-WAN. I see personally a lot of capabilities under SD-WAN because they're more software defined, and in many cases they have partnership with the SASE vendors, and I can do provisioning and connect between them. This way, if I have multiple offices I need to configure, it's going to be easier done with the provisioning and less manual labor. I definitely always want two tunnels for high availability, a primary tunnel and a backup tunnel. And if the tunnel goes down, depending on the vendor, it may potentially automatically move to a backup tunnel if there's a communication between the SD-WAN vendor and the SASE vendor, and there is less, you may need to do it manually. You also want to consider that the tunnels have a bandwidth, and if you need a very high internet, maybe more than 500 megs, you may need to create 2 or 3 tunnels depending on if you use GRE or IPsec. It also needs to come to consideration as well when you're doing your architecture. We also see a lot of shift lately because we work from home to the client option. I basically install client on my device, on my laptop. The client automatically probe the internet, find the closest POP location in the internet, and tunnel the traffic there. You may ask, what do I do when a client or the user come back to the office? There's two ways to deal with it. I can automatically shut down the client and use the configuration in the office, or I can let the client run and use the client. Then you may ask, if I can do everything with the client, why do I need the tunnels in the office? There's an answer for this as well. For many cases, you don't want to install the client on a server environment because we try to keep the servers as less client as possible. You cannot install the client on your IoT devices and your network devices, and all these devices may need access to the internet. This is why we have the combination between the tunnels and the clients. Let's jump into Secure Web Gateway and Firewall as a Service. Basically, it's an inline control. You can see on the left different security options here, and I want to inspect the traffic when you're going to the internet. Remember we spoke about scalability? This is an important part. When you have a device on-prem and you need to decrypt SSL and you want to decrypt SSL, it requires a lot of horsepower. And with the certificates became bigger, what I mean by this, the key is 1K, 2K, 4K, it requires more horsepower from the device. So if you move if the internet move the certificates from 2K to 4K, for example, you will probably need much more horsepower from your secure web gateway or firewall. It will require more resources, and your throughput and bandwidth will go down. This shouldn't be a problem if you use a cloud-based solution, because this becomes their problem. They will supply the compute for you. For you, you will get whatever you promised to get, the bandwidth you need, and basically the availability and the latency you need. If you're in the office, you can go through the cloud web gateway firewall, same as the client, because the traffic will be routed towards there. It could be access to your Facebook, it could be access to your SaaS applications. Definitely we want to block malware sites. We usually use dynamic categories for this as well. Whatever the provider find and use their threat intelligence, it's also an important part, because majority of the SASE provider not just give you the ability to block what you want, they also will suggest what need to be blocked. Another important part, it's browser isolation. It became quite a popular topic, and I hear more and more customers want the topic. Browser isolation create almost like a gap between you and the website you're browsing. In certain cases, you're getting almost like an HTML5 video feed versus the entire website. This way, if the website has any potential problematic malware files, you're not getting them. And the browser isolation cap, in most cases, for uncategorized traffic. This way, if you trust the traffic and you know the website, you browse it normally. But if it's a new domain or new website, then the SASE provider will automatically shift to browser isolation, or you will define it in your policy to do this. This way, you can safely browse where you need, and for the traffic that it's potentially dangerous, you have browser isolation. Very good and very, very interesting approach that I believe the correct way to do it. Definitely we have sandboxing and DLP as well to protect us from files we download, and also from understanding what kind of files you're uploading to the internet and if your company policy allow to upload such files. Let's flip to the other part, the Zero Trust Network Access, ZTNA part. It's basically replacing the VPNs as we know. There's Many advantages here, and I will describe few of them. One, the way it's working, we have a cloud POP in the internet. We have almost like an agent or reverse proxy in on-prem. What I mean by reverse proxy, not reverse tunnel or proxy device, that it create a tunnel from internal data center back to the cloud provider. And this way, when you accessing the applications on the site, on data center, there is no exposure of IP because the cloud POP is the one that doing the connection between them. With the traditional VPN devices, you have to expose an IP and you connect to this IP and only then you get access. This way, there is no issue if there is a vulnerability on the traditional remote VPN solutions because nothing to expose. The bad guys, the hacker doesn't even know you may use such solution because nothing is exposed to outside. This is one part. Second one, by definition, we only allow you access to the applications you need, versus in majority of the cases, the VPN just give you access and then you create rules on top. And in majority of the time, the moment you VPN in, you can do almost anything on the environment. It also become a very good companion to secure web gateway and firewall as a service, because the firewall as a service will protect you outbound browsing, and ZTNA will protect you to go back to the office, versus right now, many companies still do what we call full tunneling. They tunnel the entire traffic back to the office, then it goes to the firewall, to the internet. In this scenario, we first of all put double pressure on the internet because we use it twice. We need a bigger devices to do it. We're probably gonna have much more latency into the traffic because we need to go back to the office. And if you're in New York and your main office is in Las Vegas or California, you need to go all the way there first. So by split tunneling the traffic, and the traffic that need to go to the office will go to ZTNA, and the traffic that need to go to the internet will go to Cloud Web Gateway, you providing security and access as well. Important part to think here that many companies not sure on all the applications people need to have access. This why in many cases the companies that move to ZTNA first have a bit of an open policy to learn all the applications, but it's definitely important as quick as possible to close the gap and only to allow it, not to leave it as any, because then you didn't achieve anything in this case. There is also interesting use cases here because ZTNA can be clientless or client-based. With the client, I can understand from where you're coming. I can do posture check as well to actually sure, are your corporate device, do you have my MDM installed, are you part of my domain, and many other checks to validate if I want to even give you access and you're not potentially some kind of shady person that stole the credentials of somewhere. Of course, because we're talking about zero trust, we want to connect it to your identity and we want to know who you are and only allow access to you and not from where you're coming. And depending on the configuration, I can put behavior on top to see from where you're connecting. For example, if Evgeniy connecting today from Toronto, but in next 5 minutes he connects from Singapore, Evgeniy probably cannot travel so fast. Even so, I believe I can be quite fast. Then we can apply logic and behavior to see if we see such shady activity, we may create an additional security authentication or control, or potentially even block the account. So on top of ZTNA and SASE as well, the secure web gateway part, we can put behavior part and definitely do posture check from where you're coming. And basically, we almost whitelisting some of the, or blacklisting, in this case, the bad people that are trying to connect and do something else with the environment. So we are putting layers of security We use your identity. We only allow access to applications you need. We do a posture check to see from where you're coming. And all these layers become much, much harder to just piggyback and do something about it. With the clientless VPN, it's a very good option for people that are doing contract work for you or remote workers in some cases. They can go to a browser, connect from there. This way they don't need to install anything. You can also much easier to do session monitoring and recording on what they're doing. For example, if you use external party to do changes in your environment, you can monitor and record when and how they did the changes. Let's go talk about CASB. CASB is a very, very interesting topic because there was a couple of phases in CASB. When CASB started, the main idea was to take logs from firewalls and security web gateways, analyze the log, and tell you about shadow IT. Very, very quickly, people wanted to have more, not just to know what to block, or in some cases had an API connectivity, they wanted to actually block it. So many secure web gateway companies and firewall companies acquired CASB vendors or created the space by themselves, or CASB vendors created an options for inline blocking. Inline blocking is pretty much secure web gateway or firewall, and this was a similarity between cloud security web gateways and CASBs as well. With this way, I can block stuff when you're in the office. But there's other way to connect as well. What I'm connecting to not from the office, using IDP, Okta, Azure, Ping, and many others, I can trigger reverse proxy, and when you connect to my applications, make sure I use reverse proxy, and you're gonna go through my CASB, and I can still put policy on the DLP, for example, or what can you cannot do. But there's other options as well. What if I just connect to Dropbox from any PC? There's very hard or no way to understand this traffic inline or not inline. This way we use API, almost like a side way to connect to SaaS applications, Dropbox, Office 365, Salesforce, and many, many more, and do the inspection like this. I uploading file to a Dropbox, my CASB provider going to Dropbox right away, analyzing my file. It may say, oh, Evgeny, you upload this file with very important information, but by mistake you share this with everyone. So we're going to remove the file, or you have to change the permission. Or the file has a classified information, we're going to actually encrypt the file for you. And many, many cases like this, or what I can or cannot do with such files. Later on, we widen the scope, and many of the CASB providers went to also check what's happening with Azure, GCP, and AWS. We call them CSPM. There's definitely a dedicated CSPM tools, but we definitely saw many CASB original providers, it's right now called SASE, went there as well, because in the similar matter, I can understand what's on your S3 buckets, what's available in AWS or Azure, and what is misconfigured. So similar to the previous graphics we show, we have an inline control for CASB, we have API on the site control, we can do malware inspection, we can do DLP inspection, we can apply data classification that we understand as well, we can do more behavior, understand from where you're coming as well. And you may notice there's a lot of similarity between the ZTNA part, between the secure web gateway and CASB. I spoke about DLP multiple times, I spoke about behavior multiple times, I spoke about posture check multiple times, but there's still different solutions. So we'll get there. So let's teach all together. If you work from home, you basically have 3 different passes. One is the traffic you don't inspect, like a void traffic, for example. There's pretty much no point to inspect void traffic, or traffic we cannot inspect, like Outlook traffic. As a client, it's very, very almost impossible to inspect. We have internet traffic with inline controls. that we can inspect, we can decrypt, we can apply policy, we can block, we can do many, many different things. We have remote access traffic, ZTNA, that we can also inspect and apply many different things. We have a sideway channel over the API for CSPM and CASB. And if you look on the left and you see working from anywhere, we're kind of talking about what's the point to have different solutions. Shouldn't I have one solution where I can apply policy for DLP, for malware, for my classification? Yeah, you should, because you're going to simplify your life by a lot. And this could be for BYOD people, this could be for corporate devices, this could be for external people as well. Let's switch to SASE, as I mentioned, SASE, and why it's important. Secure Service Edge. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, SASE was defined by Gartner as a framework in 2019. SASE was defined by Gartner in July 2021, and the first Magic Quadrant was released, I believe, in January or beginning of February. And this is a new market category. Basically, there was a Magic Quadrant for web gateway, there was a Magic Quadrant for firewalls, there was a Magic Quadrant for CASB, there was never a Magic Quadrant for ZTNA. We will now see one Magic Quadrant that will have ZTNA, CASB, Firewall as a Service, and ZTNA under one Magic Quadrant. We're probably still going to have Magic Quadrant for firewalls on-prem, going to be a bit separate, but the major pillars of cloud security controls under SASE framework now are going to be SASE. And it makes sense if you notice we spoke multiple times about similarity between the controls and how do I apply to them. So why would I do it in three different places if I can do it in one place? What's the difference? Secure Access Service Edge has access, SASE doesn't have access. What does it mean? We take just the security part and we remove the SD-WAN. Is it mean SD-WAN is not important? No, SD-WAN is still important. There's a lot of fundamental controls we need there, but we are focusing on the security aspect and less on how the traffic getting there. So think about this, okay? Do I care if it came over the endpoint? Do I care if it came over SD-WAN or VPN, wireless, or some other place? I care about the security I can apply on top of it. We're gonna still see vendors that has multiple offering, and it's totally fine because you're gonna have a better integration. But this is where the market is going, and I believe it's very important to have them under one umbrella. Just quickly explain. To elaborate, we have a network side on the left, we have security on the right here. This SASE part, removing the network and only focusing on the security controls we see on the right. Let's bring it all together and have some conclusion here. When you're going to choose a vendor, first of all, you must watch the podcast. There's more than 25 vendors that we reviewed on ZTNA and security web gateway and the cloud. But secondly, you want to think about traffic route optimization. You want to understand where are your offices located and where is the companies that you want to buy the SASE from, POP located. Because you don't want that if you're located in Toronto and majority of the people are here, but they don't have a POP here. Exclusions. You want to understand what's happening there, what can be excluded, how you're actually working, how to work with everything else you have in your environment. You definitely want to have a mature posture check with your SASE vendor. You want to understand if this is a corporate laptop, not a corporate laptop, can I apply policy based on your posture? Behavior and risk policy is almost on the top of the pyramid, because I can create all the logic and then on top of it put behavior in a way, XDR-ish part, but I don't want to go there too much, to understand from where you're coming, what you can do, and create a very interesting dynamic on the user, what they do, where they go, reporting. This could be useful for potentially revoke access, but also create reports to understand user behavior, to understand what they do and how they do stuff. And definitely we want to combine all this to see if people using sanctioned apps, unsanctioned apps, and definitely block the ones that are unsanctioned. I mentioned multiple times about policy creation. We don't want to go to multiple places. We want to have simplified DLP control. In my mind, I think email security should be under SSE as well, but it's a separate topic because ideally I want to DLP control for my email, for my cloud SaaS, for my cloud IaaS, for my inline network, for my remote access, and I want to put it in one umbrella, in one vendor, and make sure it goes across and I don't need to reconfigure it multiple times. And definitely, if you want to have a good reporting, if you have a good solution but you doesn't know what it does, then you're going to be in trouble. It's probably related to user behavior as well, because if the company don't have a mature reporting, they will not have able to have a mature user behavior as well. And last one, many of the companies use SAME and they should use SAME, so you want to understand how the solution will connect to your existing SAME and how you will get this information. Where you start? You basically need to start by understand where you are right now. Every company will have a different path, but you just don't want to build all the way and just go there because you want to build something, stop, build something, stop, build something, stop. You probably want to understand what kind of applications you have right now in the environment and then create sanctioned and unsanctioned apps. You want to understand what kind of applications people need to access remotely. This way you're going to create a policy later on. There's many different options from where to start, but you just don't want to do everything right away. You want to build a plan, assess, and probably make some changes. I'm done. I'm very happy to answer your questions. I'm very happy to be here. I have a lot of knowledge that's very hard to put in 40 minutes, but definitely I'm here right now, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them right now. And if I don't have an answer, I'll later on make sure I'll get back to you.
Great presentation, Evgeniy. Really learned a lot there. I love all the insight and wise advice, and the vendor selection chart as well was really helpful. So we have some great questions coming in here from the audience. If anyone's out there and you have a question about SASE and SSE, now's the time to get it in. Evgeniy, you ready for some Q&A?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Let's see. First question I saw here came from Bradford. He's asking about how disruptive are SASE and as a service updates and upgrades. Any advice on that?
It's a good question. So it's really going to be depend on the vendors, but because they have the scalability they build, they, in most of the cases from what I see in the vendor I work with, are not disruptive because they're making the changes and they can bring in up and down. In many cases, they use containers on the back end to do it, so you will not feel it because the high availability will take care and it will direct the traffic to the container or to the workload that right now is working for you. They, in some cases, publish the changes, some cases not really, because there's many different vendors. But from my experience, you're not able to feel them when you're working. And from the disruptive perspective, it will only allow for the inline traffic because the other one are, in majority of the cases, are a backend. Maybe ZTNA, the remote access, is also the inline part. So you shouldn't afraid from the disruptive perspective because it's something that it goes into the account to the solution. But it's a good question to ask the provider you're going to be working with what they do, how they notify, how would you know as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great tip to ask. Make sure you ask that question when selecting a provider. There's a couple questions here, one from Harvey and one from Chris, who are both kind of similar questions. Harvey's asking, what are the pros and cons of SASE? And Chris wants to know, what are some of the drawbacks?
Great. So it is very similar. With every outsourcing part, you give somebody else the keys, basically the power to maintain the SLA and the availability. in majority of the cases, their SLA, their availability, their 3, 4, 5 nines will be better than yours. But if you want to control everything, then you are the one then building the availability structure, the multiple firewalls, multiple web gateways, routers. So in this case, you're giving control to someone else. Same as we noticed when we moved to Office 365, if Microsoft is down, then you're affected as well. Same could be with the SASE provider. If Netscope, Azure, Zscaler, iBoss, Palo having issue with the infrastructure, you will be impacted. And in many cases, you will not able to do anything until they bring it back because you're dependent on them. In majority of the cases, this is the biggest drawback with the SaaS providers in general, because you lose this control. Having said this, it's probably easier for them to maintain this. So if you're not a government facility, military facility, or you really, really want to control all the SLAs, all the latency in your environment, then you may want to do it yourself. Another part, because in this case, you basically pay monthly or annually, you're not buying upfront. So in some cases, you will need to look on the pricing perspective, because you're not buying an appliance that you maintain and you own, and you need to pay support annually. You basically buy a service. So you need to calculate if it's better for you from the annual perspective and budget perspective. There's a lot of things going to the account. As I mentioned in the beginning, the upgrades, the professional services that comes to it, it's also part of the pricing equation. And we all know that cybersecurity budget is not unlimited.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great points. And you mentioned, cost savings in there a little bit. Chris is also asking if you typically see a cost savings when leveraging a SASE infrastructure, and if there's any way to calculate kind of how much on average you might be able to save.
Cost saving will depend on the solution, size of your environment, and what kind of features you want. It's not an easy calculation. It will be dependent on use cases. There's, of course, formulas, and many vendors will give you a way in how to actually promote this. I will not say you will save all the time, because when you buy upfront and you can keep the appliance for a long time, you may able to save more. But when you need to buy all the solutions and you need to maintain all the solutions, then it become a different structure. So I will not able to tell you if it's a 5%, 10%, or 15%. You have to do the calculation. There is the companies like what Herjavec does, for example, as part of our work as a value-added resale, is to help you calculate the ROI for the solutions. And majority of the good VARs and the vendors as well will help you with these calculations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those like your mileage may vary kind of thing. Um, Eric is asking, Eric is asking for some clarification. He said, "So from what I understand, SASE cleans the unwanted traffic, allowing a clear, fast, and secure point-to-point connection. Is that correct?"
Eric, it's actually a very good definition. We do need to define unwanted, because, for example, malware site is definitely unwanted. But what about Facebook? Is Facebook unwanted or wanted? It could be wanted, could be not. But we have additional controls here. I may allow you to use Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn, but I don't want you to upload confidential information to Facebook or LinkedIn because you violate company policy. So you're absolutely right on the simple things that it should give the regular user browsing options without fearing they will gonna tumble or potential dangerous websites. This why we have the multiple of controls of the browser isolation, the URL filtering, the malware detection. So yes, you absolutely right on this part, but there's additional parts going on there as well.
Got it. Okay. Tatiana is asking, what type of AI algorithm is used for security anomaly detection?
So this will be definitely depend by the vendor. In majority cases, it will be a number of options. One is their own threat intelligence, because they have groups of people that doing threat intelligence. in some cases manually, some cases automatically, they gather the information, and then you use dynamic categories to block such websites. In some cases, they will analyze the websites, and this where the AI and ML will come in and bring the risk of this website up. What are they using in the backend? Everybody will use their own, and I'm not sure every vendor will share this information with you without an NDA or you being a paying customer.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for answering that one. Let's looks like we've covered really most of the questions that have come in, and I
I
know we're
saw
starting.
one question there about
Yeah,
acronyms. Yes,
yeah, go
there's a
ahead.
lot of acronyms. I know. Uh, I'm not sure who asked this. I think it was Bradford. Thank you for this. First of all, go to securityarchitecture.org website. We have a dictionary. Majority of the acronyms are there. I know it's hard in our industry because our industry is basically part of our acronyms. We have a lot of different acronyms, and Gardner and Forrester not making the easier and life easier here. We have NG now have other firewalls. We had SASE, now it's SSE. We used to have EDR, EPP, now it's XDR. So there's a lot of confusion there. This is why we have dictionaries, this is why we have glossaries, this is why we have people to help and explain. This is the way it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the way it is in the world of security and networking. And I did post a link to the dictionary, the cybersecurity dictionary there over at your website, securityarchitecture.org. So make sure that everyone out there checks it out. Tell us a little bit before we go, if you would, Evgeniy, about your podcast. What sort of topics have you been covering and what do you plan to cover?
Thank you. The idea came from working with customers for so many years, and we noticed that customers sometimes blame the vendor. Oh, this vendor is not good for me. This vendor is not performing as we expected. Oh, they promised this. But in reality, the customer sometimes not doing good due diligence, not building good POC success criteria, and then the vendor end up on a shelfware, as we call. So we decided to start a podcast that will have a very, very focused criteria. We will do architecture and design. We will not talk about malware. We will not talk about news. We will review vendors and we will go deeper on the architecture and design. We'll ask the questions that we believe marketing not always posting and not always talking about them. And the way we started is with seasons. We'll pick a seasons, almost like Netflix. Maybe one day we'll be there. We'll create topics for the season, and then we'll invite 5, 10, 15 vendors, and each vendor will answer the same type of questions. For season 1, it was actually in the beginning of pandemic, we did SASE outbound browsing. We had, I believe, 9 vendors there, and every vendor explained how they tackle the topic of outbound browsing. This way, you as an end user or somebody that wants to learn more on the topic can go watch every episode and understand how different vendor basically solve the problem. In which way, what is the architecture? Do they use public clouds? Do they use private clouds? How they route the traffic? How they use agents? And many, many, many different things. Season 2 was about remote access, also in the SASE space. Season 3, we just finished. We did application security. The light came on when Log4j came out, and we decided, okay, it's a good idea to do application security more, and also SolarWinds. And right now, we're actually in the middle of the recording of the season 4. We're going to do browser isolation. It's a very narrow topic, but part of SSE and SASE. We're going to have around 8 vendors, some of them with remote browser isolation, and some of them the one that has their own browser. That's a brand new category because we in the cybersecurity had a lot of endpoint security vendors. But this is the first time we have vendors that create their own secure browser. So it's very, very interesting. We're going to have mix of different vendors. We also did other episodes called Launchpad, where we just reviewed a vendor architecture and design. This is our area of expertise. This is where we want to center, and this is the plan for the next couple of years.
Excellent. I love the idea of having the podcast organized in seasons and then asking the vendors all the same questions. It sounds like we need to go binge watch some security architecture podcast instead of Netflix and learn about all these really cool security innovations happening in the industry. I want to remind everyone I posted a link to that in the questions pane there. It's just simply security-architecture.org. You can go out there and check it out, subscribe to the podcast, and it looks like you'll also find it on, just about anywhere that you listen to podcasts as well. There's links to it here on
So
Google
it's
Podcasts.
audio, it's video as well. Yeah, we do share screen. We have a LinkedIn group that we post a lot of stuff there as well.
Excellent. Very cool. Over on YouTube as well, it looks like. So great learning opportunity for everyone out there, security-architecture.org. Well, Evgeniy, it's been great having you on the event today. I learned a lot. I know the audience did as well. Thank you so much for your expert presentation.
Thank you very much for hosting me here.
Absolutely. And thank you to everyone out there who joined us in the audience today. Before you go, I want to remind you to say thank you to our sponsor as well. Check them out, Palo Alto Networks. You can click in the handouts tab right there, and there is a link, a QR code to get the 10 tenets of an effective SASE solution. You can download that ebook using the QR code and visit, of course, paloaltonetworks.com for more information. All right, before we go, I do want to announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. This is going out to Rakesh Arora from Maryland, I believe it was. Rakesh Arora. Congratulations. We'll be reaching out to you to deliver your Amazon $300 gift card. And thank you, of course, to everyone who joined us on the event today. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.